My name's Bryan Mercer. I'm with an organization based here in Philadelphia called the Media Mobilizing Project. And essentially what Media Mobilizing Project's work is using media and communications to help build bridges across the different organizing struggles, social justice work, economic justice work happening here in the region. We've been around for about 10 years now, and through that work we've helped in fights around education and the chronic underfunding of schools here in Philadelphia. We've helped with different labor fights around workers' rights, from working with taxi workers around their right to organize on their jobs and their cabs as taxi workers, to hotel workers and their rights to organize in unorganized hotels throughout the city. And so, yeah, our work is really to try to bring out and build those common bridges across these different struggles and among the different struggles. And so how we do some of that is, so we run a website and we keep kind of a blog there with different stories and reports from organizations that we collaborate with. But then we do a lot of video projects, really explicitly with groups. And right now, actually, we're filming a short documentary series called Groundwork, Fighting for Justice in the Birthplace of America. And the idea around the piece is to really bring out the stories of why people choose to organize as a route to solving everyday issues. So we're following in that piece a woman who works at Popeyes and is part of the Fight for 15 movement and why she joined that fight. We're following neighborhood organizers who are faced with chronic flooding in their neighborhood, and their neighborhood recently having a Superfund site located right next door. And we're also following immigrants who are organizing for driver's licenses because driver's licenses were taken away from any Pennsylvanian without a social security number. So through that piece, we're hoping to show and uplift some of these stories of why people come to organize and how organizing can become a part of, a route to change and transformation, right? And trying to break through, I guess, the story or point of organizing that we often see of the moment of crisis or the moment of action or the moment of protest, and get to kind of the human stories behind that. But yeah, some of the other big projects that we're doing right now, we're also doing a story collecting campaign where we're collecting stories from parents on their experience of the education system in Philadelphia. There's this narrative that's out there, not just in Philly, but around the country, of that parents don't care about schools, right? And parents are divesting from schools and moving their kids out of the local schools and into charter schools. But what we're finding is actually when you talk to parents, you hear the exact opposite, right? That parents care about the schools and are actually working together to make their schools better, and that the real problem sits with the underfunding of our schools, the divestment of the state from our schools, and the role that companies and private interests have played in that process, right? And then just to mark one other piece of work that we're doing, and this is a piece of work that I think connects a lot with how I know Alfredo through the Media Action Grassroots Network, this national network of organizations working on media policy and reform. We're waging a campaign right now against Comcast. So we've helped in the national work against Comcast, particularly with the fight around net neutrality, the fight to stop the Comcast merger, through really turning out local people at different points in the process to really speak out against the merger. And right now, Philadelphia is in what's called a franchise agreement process. So the agreement that Comcast has to deliver cable service in Philadelphia is up for renegotiation. And so we're using that as a chance in this city to connect it to the national issues around media reform, but also around local bread and butter issues, things like expanding affordable internet access, things like funding public services, and things like protecting workers' rights. And we're seeing this great set of support from everyday folks throughout communities in the city who, turned out, basically 200 or so people turned out to public hearings to speak out on the Comcast playing a bigger role in the city and being held accountable. And then we also, we're seeing that support too translate into city council people and even the mayor take really progressive stances around this. So that's just a sense of some of our work. I mean, I'm sorry I couldn't catch more today. I would love to, just from what I can catch from being here, pick up more about what APC is and what all of you are doing. And it's cool to have, I guess a bunch of folks are from out of town. Is that right? Okay. So it's cool to have, like, you come to Philly. I hope you get some chance to, really grab a cheesesteak.
How many charters are there? What's the effect of charters?
Oh, it's a major effect. I don't know the number offhand, but something like 30% of the schools are now charters in the city. And overall, charters perform actually at the same level as neighborhood schools, but it's setting up this competition for resources and draining resources from the local neighborhood schools. And charters aren't accountable in the same way. So a lot of the debate in Philly is actually from progressives and from communities about how to make charters more accountable, because they don't have to live up to the same test standards or the same standards around their funding and how they spend money or what students they keep. So there's this common practice amongst charters of if a student is low performing, they push that student out so that student doesn't reflect badly on that school's test performance, for example. So the charter debate is a really it's a pretty heated one in the city, honestly. But one of the things that happened here in Philly just a month ago now, there was a primary election. There was a primary election. This is a Democratic town, of course, right? Democrats have a big influence. But in that primary, we saw there was a candidate for mayor, the Democratic ticket for mayor, who was really backed and ran on this platform of charters. He got over $6 million of support from local hedge fund operators. This guy named Anthony Hardy Williams Jr. And he actually lost to a progressive backed by labor and the building trades. And that, I think, represents in part that the charter argument isn't winning anymore in the city. So.
What's this Comcast? Sorry, I'm not American.
Okay, what's Comcast? Okay, so Comcast, that's a great question. So
media monopoly.
They are the biggest media monopoly in the United States. They may be one of the biggest worldwide, if not the biggest worldwide. They are the cable and internet service provider. So if you live in basically the 10 largest cities in the U.S., then Comcast is often your only option for getting connected to the internet. Their headquarters are right here down the street. So the very tall building, the tallest building in the city, that's their building. They were a major actor behind the push to get rid of net neutrality. And they were attempting to, as of about 2 months ago, to merge with the second largest cable company, Time Warner. And if that merger would have went through, they would have been the biggest cable company, and they would have been in 19 of the 20 biggest U.S. cities. So stopping that merger was definitely a step forward and kind of stopping the progress of media consolidation in the U.S. I mean, that said, it isn't like it's a perfect situation at all, right? Now, Time Warner Cable and this other company, Charter Cable, are talking about merging. So like the number 2 and 4 company now want to merge after this. And then also, Comcast actually bought NBC Universal. So NBC Universal, they run the NBC channel and have a bunch of other media properties. So there's the media system in the U.S. is already just very, very monopolized. Yep, and consolidated.
Are they union here? Or they oppose the unions, Comcast?
Well, generally they do oppose the unions. There are some union workers in Comcast, but not, definitely not all of them. And one of the issues that came up actually 2 years ago, and we did some work around, is there was a push for paid sick leave. Basically, if you're a worker and you're not at a big company or a company with a lot of money, then it's very likely you don't get sick leave, especially like if you're like a restaurant worker. And so there's been a long push for legislation that requires any business with like more than 5 employees to have sick leave. And Comcast originally stopped that. They played in backdoors and city politics to prevent that from happening. They're like executives. But that recently passed last year actually. And so now, I think it just started a few months ago. There's now sick leave for workers at any business, I think bigger than 8 employees or something like that. So yeah, Comcast though, they have a really big kind of like behind the doors attack on labor. Yeah.
What about community access? Is there community access in
For
Philadelphia?
like community media access, yeah. I would highly recommend while you all are here to check out PhillyCam, Philly Community Access Media, and PhillyCam there. It's not far of a walk from here. It's on 8th and Randstead, like basically 2 blocks south of Market at either 7th or 8th Street. Sorry, I mixed it up. I think 7th Street, yep, at 7th Street, 2 blocks south of Market. There's a media center. And that media center was, it was long fought for, about 25 years of public, organizing. But they created this really beautiful media center out of it. And it's on a few channels on the cable stations here, and on the FiOS, the like fiber optic station. One unfortunate thing, the station, it had an accident just a few days ago, so I think their window got busted out. A car like a truck backed into the station by accident, like, because you can imagine these big busy streets, right? Like a bad news, but great people, amazing place if you get a chance to see it. We're doing some policy work, so the campaign around Comcast is very much so policy work, and like advocacy, trying to get people through, like, to write in letters, make phone calls, come to public hearings around these issues. And then our media work, a lot of our media work is kind of short form, but documentary style. So we produce a lot of pieces in the 5 to 10 minute range. This piece we're working on now about kind of leaders and organizing, that's going to be in the 45-minute range. So,
And that's the core of your work, these
Yeah.
short documentaries. And how do you distribute them?
mostly through the internet, yeah, mostly through the internet. But then we host and do a lot of like public screenings, gatherings, and bring together the partners for pieces.
Are the unions involved in doing video work here?
Yeah, definitely so, definitely so. And we work with a number of unions on videos, especially the teachers union, because of the focus around issues of education. If you want some more background on the education fight, there's a short piece we made called "Our Schools Are Not for Sale," that talks about the education issues in the area. That's like a 10-minute piece, and we made it working with the unions. Yeah. Cool.
Where do you host the videos? Do you use YouTube or
Yeah, we usually mix of like YouTube and Vimeo, and then things go back to our website and our Facebook and stuff like that. If it can figure out the bandwidth issue, like we have a lot of storage on site. We built like 2 RAID arrays to deal with all the video that we're capturing, right? So like right now we have like 20 terabytes of storage on hand. That's basically like 10 years of community actions and organizing in the Philadelphia region, right? And we can expand that up to like 90 terabytes, like duplicated, right? But you'd have to be in our office to see all of that stuff, and figuring out how we can make that accessible through the public internet could be really exciting or interesting for us, yeah. Around the Philly school system, that piece got 80,000 views. And then, and it was a piece that got some national distribution. Websites like Upworthy picked it up as a way to show what was going on in the Philly school system. We've actually found some interesting success too with really short pieces on Facebook, kind of gaming how Facebook tries to game all of us, right?
How Facebook what?
Tries to game all of us, like how unfair it is, right? Because Facebook favors video that you upload directly to their servers, and it favors video that is short format and that's interesting to look at without having to click play. You know, so we've done some short pieces like coverage of rallies and marches, where we did one short piece that's a time-lapse video of the MLK Day in Philly. So MLK Day is often a major day of action. Martin Luther King Day, it's like, you know, everyone gets off for that day, or most people get off for that day. And there's often a really big focus on kind of service work. Like, let's go out and, like, you know, clean the yard or like paint a school. But then there's also the organizing community goes out and talks about economic and social justice issues, right? And often protests. And so there was a protest of about 8,000 people, which, you know, is not a usual occurrence in this city. And so we did a time-lapse video of the protest, and that got like 30,000 views on Facebook, right? So yeah, I think also, yeah, some pieces of ours have been able to have that type of reach. Other pieces of ours just have like 150 views because that's who it's relevant to or who we've gotten it out to. But yeah, it's a wide range depending on
The repression and racism, the murders in Charleston and Mumia Abu Jamal, the repression here, what has happened in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a major issue, and there's some really exciting youth-based work, youth-led work, Black youth leading that around these issues. You know, so there's a great organization called In Defense of Black Bodies that's done some amazing media highlighting the issue and some amazing public actions highlighting the issues. There's also a broad coalition of churches called Power, people organized to witness, empower, and rebuild, and it's basically it's a coalition of churches that has made this a major part of their platform and is pushing for reforming the police commission here. And
Reforming what?
the police
Okay.
commission. There's a review board of police, but they're not well funded, and they don't have any everything that they do is advisory. And so the push is to make sure that they have the resources that they need and that they can independently prosecute police for misconduct. Because right now, nothing basically goes through, right? So there's been some great work led by those organizations, and we've supported that where we can. And then, of course, like all of this is, I think there's a national convening happening in Cleveland called Movements for Black Lives. That's going to be a major moment of people around the country coming together to talk about these issues.
What's the unemployment rate?
It's, you know, it's officially somewhere around 7 or 8%, but there's, you know, the unemployment numbers are really deceptive, right? Because there's so many people who are no longer like just counted because they stopped looking for work. So there's a large, poor, long-time unemployed population in the city. I mean, I think probably a more accurate estimate would be around 20% of the city, like really, like, yeah, unemployed, underemployed. The Philadelphia is of the largest cities in the country, the poorest. So if you take like the 10 largest cities in the United States, Philadelphia would be #1 for poverty rates by federal statistics, right? Not fully considering the cost of living, things like this. So it's major, and over the last 20 years or so, there's been massive development, but only in this part of Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, right, and some parts of West Philadelphia. So as soon as you go to the outside of those bounds, you see the poverty and how working class folks like have to try to survive, right? Yeah, that's Philly. It's a really inequitable city and a really segregated city too. long-standing segregation throughout Philly. That has changed somewhat through like a growing immigrant population, and has also changed somewhat through growing white communities of young folks moving in, but is still largely divided along the same lines.
What's the unemployment rate of African American youth?
It's gotta be something like 30-40%. Yeah.
Your short video.
Good editorial staff, so we get editorials placed in there a lot. And then yeah, for a long while, Philly had a great reporter, this guy Dan Denver, who was covering kind of insider politics in the city. But he moved on. He now writes actually, but he writes nationally. So if you're interested in U.S. news, I would definitely follow his work. In the Atlantic, he writes for the Atlantic, and there's the kind of blog called City Lab. It's a great coverage of like politics in the U.S. right now. But yeah, I think we definitely are open to and push for like